10 minutes till ignition, and the man climbs up the thruster with a $30,000 pair of pliers. And if he turns too tight, the gyroscopic hubs could overstabilize. If it's too loose, the seat pads.
Step 28 is the final step in the basic pitching magic sequence, and that is throwing a pitch. Now, you'll notice that most of the pitchers I'm using as examples start their pitch from in front of their leg. Some of them swing back a little bit with their right arm. Some will swing back even more. It really doesn't matter how you start. All you're trying to do is get into a good position by the time you reach the K position. And whatever makes the student comfortable is the style that she should use. I personally like the one that starts in front of the leg and just goes forward for a couple of reasons. One is it seems to work better in terms of getting into the attack position, which will ultimately help you throw harder. And the other one that's more important, especially for the beginners, is that it has fewer moving parts, and there's fewer things that could go wrong with that type of delivery. And that's very important for the little kids, is to have a comfort zone and stick with it. So we'll take a look at 3 of our demonstrators, and I'll show them to you first, and you can formulate ideas as to how we might look for good things and bad things with these. And then I'll go into a more detailed description of what it is that I see. When you're working with pitchers, it really makes a difference as to how much time you have to work with them, as to what it is you're going to emphasize during your practice sessions. For example, if you have an entire winter before the season starts, you can work on a lot of fine details, but if your team has just been put together and you've been appointed the coach and no one knows anything about pitching and the first game is in 2 weeks, you've got a completely different set of circumstances to deal with in trying to get ready for the season. And a thing to keep in mind is that pitching is not rocket science. It's just a couple of very fundamental movements that the pitcher needs to reproduce with a lot of consistency and a lot of attention to detail. If she can just do those things that we looked at in the last 3 steps, she'll be a very successful pitcher. As an aside, if you've been wondering at all about the music at the beginning and the end of each steps, Howard Kranz and I performed together, and most of these songs are his songs, and I've got some that are out there. Usually I just play the beginnings and the endings of the songs. I'm going to play the bridge from one of the tunes because it's very appropriate at this point in time. The song is called Rocket Science.
Rocket science, scary ride. You make tough calls on insufficient data. Rocket science, you decide what's right and wrong, what does and doesn't matter.
So now that you've had a chance to decide what's right and what's wrong and what doesn't matter, we'll take a more detailed look at 3 of our demonstrators and see how they're doing. You can see this first one has gotten into a very good position to start. Her ankle is pushing off nicely, the thigh is straight up and down, and her arms are stretched straight out forward. She gets up into the K position and still has pretty good form. She's got a little bit of elbow flex there. Her hips are nicely open. Her hand, her left hand, glove hand, if she were wearing a glove, is not too far off of the power line. However, you can see that by the very next frame, her arm has straightened out completely. And that indeed is one of her major issues, is that she's not able to throw the ball as hard as a lot of her peers. Her hips and shoulders are pretty much on top of each other. But again, you can see that the arm is straight and just coming around. Our next demonstrator is not particularly strong in the opening position. She's standing fairly well straight up. She does have good extension with her arms, but it's not set up for a real strong leg drive. She does generate some nice elbow flex. And as you can see, if you could see her left hand clearly, it is pulled way around to the left side. And her issue in pitching is control. She throws pretty hard, but she has a lot of trouble finding the strike zone at times. Her hips and shoulders are staying pretty well on top of each other. She maintains that little bit of elbow flex all the way down. The hips could be a bit more open to give her a clearer path to get the ball by. In looking from this other angle, you can see what I was mentioning about her glove hand getting pulled way out to the left. What that tends to do is it tends to pull the shoulders closed too early. You can also see that you cannot see the ball right now when it is down behind her. When looking at a pitcher from this angle, you should be able to track the ball all the way down. Now you can see what happens here at release because her shoulders have closed a little bit. As she's letting go of the flex in the elbow, instead of the ball coming straight down the power line and generating a lot more speed, her elbow has turned and she's throwing a little bit of a sidearm pitch. And that really is hard to control the accuracy when you're throwing out away from your body like that. This next demonstrator also gets into a very, very good starting position. The lower part of her right leg is basically parallel to the ground, which is a very powerful statement to make. And she's got the nice elbow flex at the top. Her glove hand is pulling a little bit away to the left. I didn't quite capture the right frame here, but her elbow remains flexed all the way down. And here it's starting to release. The one thing that you will note in this picture is that her shoulders have pretty much closed and are facing home plate, so she's kind of pulling the ball through. Her hips are nicely open, by the way. And she's also leaning forward a bit. We'll take a look at the 10th grader, and her form is basically terrific until right at release. Her shoulders tend to close up and her hips tend to close up. Now, generally, that would be a problem that would lead to a loss of control. But last summer, she pitched 60 consecutive innings without walking anybody, and so control's not a big deal for her. And then also, if you take a look at this clip, what she's doing is she is not throwing to the cutouts in the target there. She is throwing to the corners of the cutouts. And you can see that on these 3 pitches in a row, she doesn't miss by more than a couple of inches. We are still working on the shoulders, trying to get them more open at release so she can generate a little bit more speed.